The guests gasped in shock as Olivia stood at the altar, her white gown flowing like a river of silk, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the whispers around her. The man she had loved, the one who had promised her forever, was nowhere to be found. Just hours ago, she had been dreaming of their future together, one filled with love, luxury, and a lifetime of happiness. But now, she was standing alone, abandoned and humiliated in front of hundreds of guests. Ethan Lancaster, the millionaire businessman known for his charm and wealth, had disappeared without a trace. No calls, no messages, no explanations, just gone. Olivia felt her knees weaken as the reality sank in. He had left her. The man she trusted, the man she believed in, had broken her heart in the most cruel way imaginable. Tears welled in her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wasn't going to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. Taking a deep breath, she turned away from the altar, her hands trembling as she pulled off the engagement ring he had once placed on her finger. The whispers followed her as she walked down the aisle, head held high, even though every step felt like walking through fire. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. Olivia disappeared from the high society circles she once dreamed of being part of. The heartbreak had nearly destroyed her, but she refused to let it define her. She moved to a quiet town, far away from the place where her dreams had shattered. No one knew about the woman who had once been left at the altar by one of the most eligible bachelors in the city. She started over, working tirelessly to build a life for herself. And then, the impossible happened. 1 year after that fateful day, Olivia gave birth to 4 beautiful babies, quadruplets. No one knew who the father was, and she never spoke about it. Some assumed she had met someone new. Others whispered that Ethan might be the father, but she never confirmed or denied it. All she focused on was raising her children, giving them the love and stability she never had. Years passed, and Olivia had transformed from a heartbroken woman into a strong, independent mother. She worked multiple jobs to provide for her children, ensuring they never lacked anything. She never reached out to Ethan. She never asked for help. She had erased him from her life, or at least she tried to. But fate had other plans. One ordinary afternoon, Olivia was at the park with her children, watching them play and laugh, when she felt a strange sensation, like someone was watching her. She turned her head, and there he was, Ethan Lancaster, the man who had destroyed her world. He looked different, older, more serious, but his eyes still held the same intensity, the same confidence. And when he saw the 4 little faces playing in the grass, his expression shifted. Confusion, shock, realization. And then, without a word, he walked away. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest. What was he thinking? Why had he even been there? She tried to push the encounter out of her mind, but deep down, she had a feeling that this wasn't over, and she was right. A few weeks later, she received a letter, a legal document. Ethan Lancaster was taking her to court. But why? What did he want after all these years? And most importantly, what did he know? Olivia's hands trembled as she stared at the letter. The bold black ink seemed to scream at her, demanding her attention. She read it once, then again, hoping she had misunderstood. But the words were clear. Ethan Lancaster was suing her. Her mind raced with questions. Why now? After all these years, why had he suddenly decided to come back into her life? And what did he want? The only explanation that made sense was the children. Had he figured it out? Did he know the truth? Panic bubbled in her chest, but she forced herself to stay calm. She couldn't afford to break down, not when 4 little souls depended on her. She took a deep breath and set the letter down, trying to make sense of it all. The next few days passed in a blur. Olivia met with a lawyer, trying to understand what Ethan's claims were. The official documents stated that he wanted a paternity test and, depending on the results, either full custody or visitation rights. The words sent a shiver down her spine. Full custody. The idea of losing her children was unbearable. She sat across from her lawyer, gripping the edge of the desk. Can he do this? Can he take them away from me? Her lawyer sighed, adjusting her glasses. If he can prove he's the father and decides to fight for custody, it could turn into a long legal battle. But the courts usually favor the mother, especially if the children have been with her since birth. Olivia swallowed hard. But he has money, power, influence. The lawyer nodded. That's the part that worries me. The weight of those words sat heavily on Olivia's shoulders. She had spent years rebuilding her life, shielding her children from the chaos of the past. And now, in an instant, everything was at risk. Meanwhile, Ethan sat in his sleek office, staring out the massive floor-to-ceiling windows. His thoughts were a mess. He had spent years convincing himself that leaving Olivia was the right decision. Back then, he had been under immense pressure from his family. His father had made it clear marrying Olivia, a woman with no wealth or status, would ruin his reputation and the future of their family business. Ethan had tried to fight it, but in the end, he had caved. He had chosen wealth over love, and it had haunted him every single day since. But seeing Olivia again had been a shock. She was different, stronger, more confident, and those children, the resemblance was undeniable. He had spent countless nights wondering if he had made the biggest mistake of his life. Now he needed to know the truth. The first court hearing was nerve-wracking. Olivia sat at one table, Ethan at the other. He looked at her, searching for something in her expression, but she refused to meet his eyes. When the judge asked if she would agree to a paternity test, Olivia hesitated for only a second before nodding. She had nothing to hide. The results came back a week later. Ethan was the father. The moment he saw the results, something inside him shifted. He wasn't just a man seeking answers anymore. He was a father who had missed years of his children's lives. Regret settled deep in his chest. He thought about all the birthdays, the first steps, the bedtime stories, moments he could never get back. But regret wasn't enough to change the past. Olivia knew what was coming next. The real battle had just begun. Ethan wanted shared custody, but Olivia refused to let him walk into their lives and take what he had abandoned. She had raised those children alone, sacrificed everything for them. How could he suddenly claim the right to be their father? The court proceedings dragged on, and the tension between them grew thicker with every meeting. Ethan tried to prove that he had changed, that he wanted to be there for his kids. Olivia, on the other hand, fought to protect the life she had built for them. But the deeper they dug into the battle, the more complicated things became. Secrets from the past resurfaced. Olivia learned that Ethan hadn't just left her on his own. It had been orchestrated by his father, who had threatened to cut him off if he went through with the wedding. Ethan had chosen to protect his financial future, but at the cost of everything else. Olivia felt her anger grow. All those nights she had spent wondering what she had done wrong, all the pain she had carried, had been because of a decision forced upon them. Ethan, on the other hand, struggled with his own guilt. He had spent years convincing himself that Olivia had moved on, that she was better off without him. But now, seeing what she had endured, knowing what she had gone through alone, made him realize just how deeply he had failed her. The case was reaching its breaking point. The judge was about to make a decision. But then, something unexpected happened. One of their children got sick. In the chaos of hospitals and sleepless nights, Olivia and Ethan found themselves side by side for the first time in years, both terrified, both desperate to do anything to help their child. And for the first time, they weren't opponents in a courtroom. They were just parents. But even as the walls between them started to crack, the biggest question still remained. Could Olivia ever forgive Ethan? And more importantly, did she even want to? The hospital room was filled with the steady beeping of monitors and the soft hum of machines. Olivia sat by her child's bedside, her fingers lightly brushing against their tiny hand. She had been awake for hours, unable to rest, unable to think about anything except the rhythmic rise and fall of their chest. Ethan was on the other side of the bed, his suit jacket long discarded, his sleeves rolled up, and his face lined with exhaustion. They hadn't spoken much, but in the silence, something had shifted. For the first time, it wasn't about court battles or old betrayals. It was about their child, the only thing that truly mattered. Hours stretched into days, and as they sat together through the worry and fear, they began to see something they had been too blind to recognize before. No matter how much pain the past held, they were both deeply connected by these four little lives, and when their child finally opened their eyes, weak but smiling, Ethan and Olivia both exhaled the breath they hadn't realized they were holding. It was in that moment that Olivia saw something in Ethan's eyes, something she hadn't allowed herself to believe in for a long time. Regret, pain, and most of all, love, not just for her, but for the children he had never known. Later that night, as they sat in the quiet hallway outside the hospital room, Olivia finally spoke. "Why now, Ethan?" Her voice was softer than it had been in court, no longer laced with anger, just exhaustion. "Why come back after all these years?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair and let out a long breath. "Because I was a coward," he admitted. "I let other people decide my life for me, and I convinced myself it was the right thing to do. But when I saw you that day at the park, when I saw them, I knew I couldn't run from this anymore." Olivia looked away, her heart aching with everything they had lost. "You can't just undo the past, Ethan. You weren't there when it mattered." "I know," he said, his voice raw, "and I will never forgive myself for that, but I want to be here now. I don't want to take them from you. I just want to be their father." Olivia closed her eyes, her emotions a storm inside her. Could she trust him? Could she open the door to someone who had once shattered her world? The next few weeks were filled with difficult conversations, quiet moments, and small steps forward. The court battle no longer felt like a war, but rather a negotiation, one that put the children first. Olivia still held onto her doubts, but she couldn't deny what she was seeing. Ethan wasn't just showing up for them in court, he was showing up in real life. He took them to school, helped with bedtime stories, learned what foods they liked and what made them laugh. And little by little, the walls Olivia had built around her heart started to crack. The final court ruling granted Ethan shared custody, but by then, it didn't feel like a loss. It felt like something else entirely, a second chance. One evening, as Olivia watched Ethan playing with the children in the backyard, laughter filling the air, she felt something she hadn't in a long time. Peace. She would never forget what had happened. She would never erase the pain he had caused. But as she saw the way their children looked at him, the way he looked at them, she realized something important. Sometimes people do change. And sometimes the hardest thing isn't letting go of the past. It's learning how to move forward.